Hey VC, and a culture fan here. Thought I would come on here and show some of my latest finds, actually from September and October. I found some stuff back in September and really just thought I'd make one big pile here and show them all at once. But I think I'll show the CDs first that I found. This one I found yesterday at a book sale. This is a Compact Jazz, Dinah Washington Sings the Blues, and it's sort of a more or less a compilation of her songs, pretty much like what the title says. They're orchestrated too with the Quincy Jones Orchestra, and if you like blues, then you'd probably like this. This is one that Carm showed some time back, or Gorbo 71, I think is his the number on there. Anyway, he was talking about this in one of his videos some time back about it being keyboard new age, and it's a compilation album as well. It's on the Higher Octave music label. And yeah, it's a real good CD. I was happy to pick it up, and it's fairly enjoyable. So thank you, Carm. Anyway, I was at Half Price Books here and found this, so I picked it up as well. Keith Jarrett's Colon concerts on ECM. And I believe what this is just him improvising. I believe the vinyl was a 2-album set, and so yeah, I was real happy to find this too. I've been looking for it for a long time, and got a real good price on it. Keith Jarrett, pianist. Then at Half Price Books too, I ran into this one. Fairly plain cover and back on it really, and the tracks are right here actually, and all it's just 9 in 9 movements, and I really wasn't familiar with the main guy on here, who's Carl Berger Orchestra. That's what this goes under, but I could tell it was jazz, and it's on Douglas Music. The only person on here that I was familiar with was Enrico Rava, who has played with on some ECM. He has some albums on the ECM label, and so I was hoping maybe that this would be along that lines, which indeed it is. It's sort of he's a German, and he's played with guys like Don Cherry and Ornette Coleman, and he's also played on projects like Escalator Over the Hill and Carla Bley, people like that. And the music on here actually kind of reminds me of something like what Carla Bley might do, or what let's see, there are other people on the ECM labels that play in that mold too, and that's kind of how this is. It's kind of a merging of jazz and other styles. They're orchestrated. There's a lady, excuse me, Ingrid Surso, that does just a little bit of singing on here, maybe to introduce a song or in the middle of the song, something like that. But it's kind of in that European mold of jazz, kind of composed, like I said, sort of like Carla Bley and I forget his first name. I want to say his name's Haydn. I can't think of his first name now, but at any rate, it's kind of orchestrated jazz, composed jazz, and it's really pretty good, even though the album cover is so esoteric looking. And the same thing applies to this one here. I'll leave a link up for some of this stuff below the video. This is Octurne Dimensions. They're a didn't know much about them when I picked it up, but it says the finest in Belgian jazz, and didn't know anything about them. It's on the De Werf label. It's only got 3 songs on it. The first song on here is 40 minutes long, and then there's the second song, 3 haikus, is like 18 minutes, and the third song is 14 minutes. So as you can imagine, there's a lot of different shifting. It's also like very composed, like this other CD here. It's highly composed, and it goes through these different movements and everything. And it comes with a little booklet, and they're let's see. Oh, here it is. One of them plays trumpet, flugelhorn, trombone, alto saxophone, baritone saxophone, pianos and keyboards, electric guitars, electric bass. They're like 3 drummers. I don't know if they all play at the same time, and a percussionist. But yeah, I went online, and there's a website which I'll put below where they have some of their music on their website that you can listen to. And sometimes their music shifts into like dark territory. Sometimes it's a little bit like some of those cuneiform artists, I guess. But yeah, pretty interesting band. Sort of along, almost big band or like large ensemble is what that is. Like I said, I'll leave a link, and you can listen to some of their music. And you know how be watching YouTube and you get through listening to a video and they'll throw up another video on there, and you know, it's kind of like, if you like that, maybe you'll like this or something. It's done by an algorithm or anything, and it threw up this lady here, and I watched one of her videos. It was a biography. It's a biography of her. Here's another one here. Her name is Evelyn Glennie, and she is a Scottish woman that's a percussionist. Again, I'll leave a link to those videos below. She is a Scottish percussionist. She plays you know, marimbas and vibraphones, and she plays with symphonic orchestras and everything. But in that video, she has a whole house of just full of instruments, all of them kind of percussive in nature. Some of them are homemade, and you know, anything from African thumb drums, or whatever you call them, finger drums, to xylophone like instruments that are made with wrenches that you would use to work on the house, and to clay pots. There's one video on YouTube where she's playing some clay pots. But I just found her really interesting, and so I went over to Amazon to see what she had available, and picked up these 2 CDs. That looks like some kind of, that coil thing there is probably some kind of instrument that she plays. Like I said, her whole house is full of different sort of exotic instruments and everything. And this CD here is kind of more, I guess you might say, avant-garde than say maybe this one. This one here is more orchestrated, and this one here is a little bit more avant-garde, a little bit darker, and there's no singing or anything, it's just music on it, and parts of this kind of sound like it was, you know, it could be like synthesizer music or something like that. That's the way it kind of comes off. But yeah, they were both well worth picking up, and I found her videos really interesting to watch. So like I said, I'll leave a link below. Went to some estate sales and some garage sales. I found this one. This is Ruth White's Short Circuit, and it's a synthesizer album. Excuse me. And she has different. She does different renditions of various classical composers on here, like Chopin, Debussy, Eric Satie, and Rimsky-Korsakov, and well, various ones on the Moog synthesizer. And I wasn't real sure how this would be. I'd never heard of her. Excuse me. But indeed, it's pretty cheesy, and I don't know that I'll keep it. But what was interesting on here, she does one of the songs that she does is from Debussy, "The Snow is Dancing," from the Children's Corner, which is she does her rendition almost really similar to the way that Tomita does on his album "The Snowflakes Are Dancing," although that album is way better than what this one is. But you know, a synthesizer album, so I had to pick it up and see what it sounded like. I found this. This is Martin Carthy. He's a singer-songwriter from United Kingdom. I believe he's Scottish. And this is on the Flying Fish label, I believe it is, or Rounder Records. Yeah, Rounder Records. But I was kind of hoping that maybe this might be like British folk, which indeed it is British folk. But I was hoping maybe it would be more in the line of something like, you know, Norman Blake here, like this one. This is Lighthouse on the Shore, which is a really wonderful album. And this one's even better. I like this album a lot. It's Norman Blake's Blackberry Blossom. And he's just an acoustical guitar player, and sometimes his wife will play with him as well. Forget what her name is, but yeah, Nancy Blake. She plays fiddle on this album here, and she may play on some of this other one as well. But Norman and Nancy Blake. But this one is really good if you can find this out in the wild anywhere. This is on Flying Fish Records. But both of these are really good albums, and so is this one here. This is by John Renbourn, The Hermit. And again, it's sort of a flat-picking acoustical album. And there he is right there. And I really like these three albums, so I was hoping that this Carthy album, excuse me, Martin Carthy, would be sort of along these other lines, but I didn't find this one particularly as interesting. I didn't really care for his voice as much, so yeah, it's not as good as those others, I'll put it that way. I found this album here by Mary Rhodes. This is a dulcimer album, and it's done on a really small label, sort of private pressed or something. All the text in here is in French, but which I don't read. It's on the Le Chant du Monde label, and on here you can see some of the other musicians right there. There's some fiddle playing and some banjo playing. Mary also sings a little bit, and her voice is pretty nice. And it's just a real light album of acoustical instruments. But yeah, pretty nice find. I don't think this album here, and it also came with most of the text in here is French, but she also included this flyer, which is in English, and it was like, I don't know, 4 or 5 page flyer that just kind of talks about, you know, where she's from, and you know, different kind of dulcimers and all sort of things like that, which was made for some interesting reading. But that said, I don't think that well, for one thing, the pressing on this album, being such a small label, isn't as good as, say, something on Columbia. So that album, this is on Flying Fish too. This is Malcolm Dalglish and Gray Larson's album called Thunderhead, and a really beautiful album cover. These guys, or one of them, I think it's Malcolm Dalglish. Yeah, he plays a hammered dulcimer. Gray Larson plays wooden flute and all sorts of different flutes and fiddles and stuff like that. But Mary's Rhodes album isn't quite as good as this one, but it was a lot more independently done too, and doesn't have quite the nice pressing that this one here does. But if you can find one by these two guys, are well worth picking up, and they're not that easy to find actually out in the wild, but it's a really good album. Then the other day I ran across this one here. This is Earl Gardner's album. It's called Paris Impressions Volume 2, and Earl Gardner is a pianist. This is just solo solo pianos by Earl Gardner, and it was in fairly good shape, and it's my first Columbia 6i, which is really neither here nor there to me. I found it at a really good price, so I picked it up. And the music is just really melodic, and just him on piano playing solo. And if you like that kind of thing, then yeah, it's pretty good. Found this one at half price here last weekend for a couple of bucks. It's Harry Chapin, Heads or Tails. I remember you know, the song Taxi on the radio way back when, back in the 70s. And if you like that song or some of his other hits, well, you know, this album would probably, you know, you'd probably like it as well. I found this album here, which is a bossa nova album, Walter Wanderley, Samba Soul, and it's mostly instrumentals. I don't recall any vocals being on here, but if you're into that samba music or whatever, I had one of the other album by him on CTI. Kind of like this album better, but yeah, he does samba, bossa nova, and that type thing on this album. This is on the World Pacific label, but yeah, it's pretty good. I found this by Rick Wakeman. Used to have this a long time ago on album, and I picked it up again. This is his Journey to the Center of the Earth, which is a concept progressive rock album of the Jules Verne novel of the same name. There's a little bit of dialogue on here that, you know, talks about the expedition going down into the earth and whatnot. And of course, orchestration. You can kind of see the orchestra right there on the cover. But yeah, I found it again. I thought, you know, if I could find a copy of it again, I'll buy it. So yeah, pretty fun progressive album. This is Judy Collins' album, So Early in the Spring. It's sort of like a greatest hits by her, although it was missing a few songs on some of her other albums that I like a lot. But that said, it does still have like quite a few of her hits on it, like Pretty Polly and Oh Golly, a lot of them. So, and I don't have all of her albums, particularly a lot of her earlier albums. So I was happy to pick it up. I really haven't heard this album yet, but I know she has a nice voice and everything, so I was really kind of curious how some of her earlier material sounded. And then I found this one here. This is, speaking of Tomita, this is his rendition of the Firebird Suite by Stravinsky. And of course all his stuff is synthesizer based. So yeah, I like Tomita quite a bit. His stuff is well, they're just interpretations of those classical works, but they're very imaginative, and you know, he does them his own way. So you know, I was real happy to find this one. And I was coming back from a garage sale the other day and was listening to the radio. Always listen to NPR, and was listening to Terry Gross's Fresh Air, and she was interviewing a guy, and they were talking about some guy named Lou, and finally it turned out to be Lou Reed. And so I got in and turned on the radio inside here in my kitchen while I was fixing some dinner. I'd been out running around, went and got a flu shot and what have you. But I'll leave that below too. She did a really good interview with the guy that has just written a new book on Lou Reed, and you know, I found that what the guy had to say was really interesting. So if you're into Lou Reed or find him a interesting performer or artist, then click on that link and listen to that interview. I found it pretty interesting. So, at any rate, those are some of my finds lately, and then I'll put the Octurne link there so you can go listen to some of their music. And this Evelyn Glennie biography, it's just her talking. It's a two-part video on YouTube, but I found it real interesting about her learning percussion as a child there in Scotland. She was born in Aberdeen, so if you're interested in that, you know, you can click below and listen to those as well. So that's all I have right now. I'm just enjoying my Saturday, and finally the sun came out. I think we had rain for a couple of weeks, and I'm real happy to see the sun. But hope everybody's doing fine and enjoying their music, getting ready for Halloween. So we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.